will be the first one to address our question. Of course, I'll be focusing it on from my perspective. I haven't really focused on the citizenship issues or transnationalism while I was conducting this research. But of course, when you're in the field and you're working with migrant or refugee groups, transnationalism or identity questions always come to you. So I tried to put things together in order to answer our question today. I will discuss the link between transnationalism and identity by drawing on the research I conducted with two different groups of refugees. Let me start with refugees from Turkey. I conducted this study in England, London, not Ontario, London, England, UK. And the ethnicity of refugees were Kurdish and Turkish. Here you see the map of Turkey. Most of the refugees from Turkey they originate from the east part of Turkey. Why? Because in the east, the majority of the population are Kurdish. They speak their own language, they have their own cultural ways of life, their unique practices. Many Kurdish groups leave Turkey due to the aggressive assimilation policies of Turkish authorities. Kurds want to be recognized as an ethnic group. They want their own rights, such as education in their own language. But Turkish has an assimilation policy, and they don't let them, they don't give them these rights. Some Kurds also fight for their independence. In my study, for this study, I interviewed Kurdish refugees from this region, as well as some Turkish refugees who support actively these Kurdish minorities and the rights of all minority groups in Turkey. They are left-wing and they are supporting opposing groups, so they also had trouble with Turkish authorities in Turkey, and so they had to leave the country. These are just a few pictures from the region, the cities and villages. Most of the refugees are interviewed, lived in Turkey. And this is the map, so from Turkey to England. As you see, it's not too far. Normally by flight it would take only 4 hours, but all of the refugees are interviewed. They were traveling illegally and they were escaping, trying to escape from Turkish authorities, so they had no legal documents to travel. So it took for them much longer. For some, they said that it took months to arrive to Turkey. They were using human traffickers, and they didn't know where, which country they would go and spend the night, and they didn't know which day they were gonna go to the end. And in most of the cases, the country they are going, it wasn't their choice. The human traffickers were just taking them to one of the European countries, and they were not even sure at which country they were gonna end. After arriving to UK, they apply as asylum seekers, and to get the citizenship, UK citizenship, it takes a long time, and this time period changes. It depends. For the participants of my study, for some of them it took 2 years. For some it took around 10 years. So they would never know when they would get it. In England, when they arrive in England, especially if you arrive in London, to me, for people originating from Turkey, they are lucky because there's a big established Turkish and Kurdish community in London. Most of them, they have settled in north of London. The Green Lanes area in north is known as the Turkish town by all Londoners now. When you go to this town, you feel like you are in Turkey. Turkish restaurants, shops, Turkish-style coffee shops, the stores selling products from Turkey, mosques, you can practice your religion. Then, the people living in this region, they have access to almost everything. They can get the Turkish newspapers daily. They can watch Turkish channels on TV. Satellites, cable, internet are important technologies they use, and these technologies enable refugees to follow the news, follow TV shows that are broadcasted in Turkey. These technologies actually bring daily events and lives of Turkey to the refugees' daily lives and homes. As a result, the home is no longer a memory in their minds or in their narratives. It's present, it's part of their everyday lives. And when you examine the life of a refugee who are settled within such an established community, the transnational activities and ties are very evident, because they have these transnational networks, they have associations, they have clubs with strong ties to Turkey and even to Kurdistan. After getting their passports, they visit Turkey. They also visit other European countries where they have relatives and friends. They are still politically very active. They are associated with Kurdish political parties both in Turkey and in Kurdistan. They established a community, a big neighborhood, strong links, and they are visiting Turkey, and these transnational activities provide refugees with the lifestyles they are accustomed to. And I think that it also prevents them from assimilating into the receiving society. Because the host society becomes just a place where they can maintain and at the same time negotiate their identities. Once identity is attached to a place, to a land, it's attached to a community. But transnationalism makes it possible for people to be attached to more than one spaces. You don't have to be attached to one singular space anymore. You can be attached to more than one communities. People who embody transnationalism, they live in multiple spaces. They maintain their previous attachments and belongings while developing new ones in the new spaces. I think it's important to note that transnationalism makes it possible for people to maintain their primordial ties and primordial identities. And it also makes it possible to construct multiple identities, to construct a multinational self. Maybe because of this, when I asked questions to my participants, they identified themselves as European, mixed, or world citizens. And yeah, especially in terms of citizenship, you know, I was asking, they had to give up their Turkish citizenship, and you know, they are like, we don't care with British citizenship, we feel like we are world citizens, we can go and work everywhere. I think it's also because of Britain is a member of the European Union, so they feel very free. And I felt that this citizenship was empowering them, and also to me it was very interesting to find out that none of them identified themselves as being British or like, you know, Turkish British. As if you talk to someone in Canada who settled in Canada, you would hear that, you know, I'm Turkish Canadian. But in that, with that specific group, I never heard such hyphenated identities like I am Turkish or Kurdish British. That was very interesting for me. Now let me compare this case with another case of refugees. These are refugees from Burma. That country is also called Myanmar, maybe you heard as Myanmar. And I did conduct a study with refugees from Burma in London, Ontario. Burma is a country in the Southeast Asia. As a result of ongoing war between the Burmese military and ethnic minorities for more than 40 years, millions of people have been living in the refugee camps on the borders. The current group I did an ethnographic study was from a refugee camp from the Thailand border. Currently there are 9 refugee camps on the border, on the Thailand border. Many people I interviewed were born in these refugee camps. They have spent all their lives in refugee camps, and their life experiences were limited to the experiences in this small camp and or their small visits to closed towns in Thailand. I'm going to show you some pictures. As you can see, it's very far from Canada. And I have some pictures from the refugee camp. Unfortunately, they don't have enough food because they don't have enough land to grow crops. People live on the supplies distributed by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. That's the water system at the camp. Here you can see the delivery room, and that's actually fire department. These are pictures from the library and their school. And look, this is where they resettled. London, Ontario, Canada. They came to London as government assistant convention refugees through a resettlement assistance program. So actually they had no established community. There were, before them there were some people from Burma, some Burmese and ethnically Karen, but the numbers were not so high, just like 20, 30 people. They didn't have an established community. The settlement workers arranged housing at different parts of the city. Some families were now live in the north of the city, some live in the south of the city. This is just one of the apartment buildings. Some families are having friends with are living right now. And I put this picture here to show you that nothing, as you see, nothing is familiar to them. It's a totally strange environment, and also the snow is totally new to them. It was the first time they saw snow when they moved to Canada. And this is a parent family, my friend, and this was taken at a cultural event in London last year. Okay, now we are talking about transnational ties, right, and activities. Apparently, transnational ties and activities of Karen refugees are very limited. Transnationalism is very difficult for different reasons. First of all, it's a very small and new community. It's very different from settled migrants. Second, it is technically impossible to keep in touch with family back home because mobile phones or internet are not available in the refugee camps. Also, not widely dispersed in Burma. So visiting home, it's not possible, and as you have seen, it's too far, it would cost too much, and if you think about the current situation in Burma, still it's not safe. And also another fact is that they are from refugee camps. Most of them don't even know their villages. The only place they know is the refugee camps. Most villages are burned down. They also have hardly any family members left there, and they are not even sure if they are alive or not. Some of the relatives were invited by other countries to apply for asylum, so most of them are dispersed and they don't know who is where. Even if they could visit their homes, when I asked them, some of them told me that they were so emotionally charged, so they wouldn't want to be back home. Transnational contacts are very limited to the people with whom they spend time in the refugee camp. These are the only people they know where they are settled or they can keep contacts with. And it's not easy to send remittances to home. Some of them are sending money to the people they left behind, but even this is hard to arrange to send the money to someone at the refugee camp. They fled large-scale violence, and now they are avoiding involvement with political activism. They are avoiding any resistance against the system. They don't have established associations or clubs with strong ties to Burma. When asked, they identify themselves as Pan-Canadians. They use hyphenated identities, and they define themselves as citizens of Canada. To conclude, I guess transnationalism is not always available for the refugees because they often lack necessary economic and social capital. It may be available to some of the refugees who come into an established community, who has the social capital. But from these examples, I would say that transnationalism helps maintain primordial ties and primordial identities. It also helps constructing new hybrid hyphenated identities and constructing new attachments to citizenship. But these situations depend on the transnational ties available, as well as the macrostructure of the host society. Because when I was thinking about how people would identify themselves, how they would include the national identity and make a mixture of their ethnic and national identities in the news space. I was asking myself why people never mentioned British identity in the UK while people were mentioning the Canadian identity here. I was thinking that the macrostructure of the receiving country is very important because I remember one of the orientation programs these refugees went through when they were at the refugee camps. Before they came to Canada, the Canadian officers were there, they were telling them about life in Canada, and they gave them actually a lesson about life in Canada. And, sorry, I think it's here, but I want to show you, I'm excited to show you. So they actually showed them 3 glasses of water, representing integration, segregation, and assimilation. And they said that, in Canada, we do have the assimilation policy. We do have, the integration policy. And you are free to choose which one you are going to do. If you are going to segregate yourself from the majority, or you can do that. But we will prefer people to integrate and give their color to our society. I was thinking maybe this has made a big effect in the reconstruction of their identities in the new society. But I'm also thinking that transnational ties, not being able to have these transnational links to back home or people back home, it may also help these people redefining their identities with hyphenated identities. I think it may be different for different cases and for different reasons.